A black maid who dedicated years of her life caring for the sick twin sons of a powerful white billionaire was suddenly accused of a terrible crime, stealing life-saving medication from the very children she loved like her own. With no money, no lawyer, and the world against her, she walked into court alone, surrounded by cameras and judgment. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the courtroom doors opened and everyone turned in shock. The billionaire's fragile twin sons had arrived, and what they said next completely changed everything. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Aisha had worked for several years in the large and quiet mansion owned by William Sterling. Aisha had worked for several years in the large and quiet mansion owned by William Sterling. Her job was to care for his twin sons, who had been diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, a rare and serious disease that slowly took away their ability to move. These boys depended on one of the most expensive medications in the world to survive. The medicine was kept locked away in a secure room inside the house. Aisha had grown very close to the children over the years. She fed them, helped them move, played with them, and stayed with them during their worst nights. Ethan and Evan, the pale-faced twins with bright blue eyes, looked up at her like she hung the moon. "Mama Aisha," Ethan would whisper when she tucked him in, his tiny hand gripping her finger like it was a lifeline. She wasn't their real mom. That role belonged to some ghost from William's past. But damn if she didn't feel like it. Every morning started the same. Aisha slipped into the boys' room at dawn, the soft hum of medical machines filling the air. She'd check their vitals first, her dark hands gentle against their fragile skin. "How's my little fighter today?" she'd ask Evan, who always grinned despite the tubes and braces. He'd wheel his motorized chair closer, bumping her knee on purpose. "Better now you're here," he'd say, his voice small but full of sass. Aisha would laugh, a deep, warm sound that echoed in the sterile room, chasing away the shadows of the night. The mansion sat on the outskirts of New York, a sprawling beast of glass and stone that screamed money. William Sterling, the white billionaire who owned half the tech startups in Silicon Valley, barely showed his face. He jetted off to board meetings or dates with his latest fling, leaving Aisha to hold down the fort. She didn't mind. Born in a cramped apartment in Harlem, with roots tracing back to Ghana, Aisha knew hard work. She clawed her way through nursing school on scholarships and side gigs, only to land this job that paid the bills and then some. But it wasn't about the paycheck. It was the boys. One afternoon, as rain pelted the floor-to-ceiling windows, Aisha sat on the floor with them, building a fort out of pillows and blankets. Ethan struggled to lift a cushion, his arms trembling from the effort. "I got it, buddy," she said, sliding over to help without making a big deal. He beamed, proud as punch. Evan sketched a picture nearby, a stick-figure family with Aisha right in the middle, her curly hair drawn like a wild crown. "That's us," he said, handing it over. "Forever." Aisha's chest tightened. She pinned it to the fridge later, right next to the schedule for their meds. The medication was no joke. Stored in a climate-controlled fridge behind a biometric lock, each dose costs more than her annual salary. Aisha handled it like gold, measuring, administering, logging every detail. "Can't mess this up," she'd mutter to herself, double-checking the labels. One slip, and the boys could spiral. She'd seen it once early on, Ethan gasping for air in the middle of the night, his body seizing. Aisha had stayed calm, cranking up the oxygen and calling the doc while rubbing his back. "You're okay, baby. Mama's got you." William had thanked her with a bonus check, but she waved it off. "Just doing my job," she'd said. But it was more than that. These kids had wormed their way into her heart, filling the gaps left by her own family's distance. Nights were the toughest. When the boys couldn't sleep, Aisha would pull up a chair between their beds, singing old lullabies her grandma taught her. "Swing low, sweet chariot," her voice, rich and soothing, would lull them until their eyelids drooped. Evan once woke up crying from a nightmare about the disease taking his legs forever. Aisha held him close, her shirt soaking up his tears. "I'm scared," he sobbed. "What if I can't walk like you?" She swallowed hard, fighting her own fears. "You got fight in you, kiddo. And I'll be right here every step. He nodded, snuggling in. Promise? Cross my heart. William noticed in his rare moments at home. You're good with them, he'd say over coffee, his sharp eyes appraising her like a business asset. Aisha just nodded. They're easy to love. But deep down, she wondered if he saw her as more than the help, a black woman in his white world, bridging gaps he couldn't. Emily Vaughn, his girlfriend, the sharp-tongued white lawyer, always eyed Aisha with suspicion during visits. Don't get too attached, she'd quip, flipping her blonde hair. Aisha ignored it, focusing on the boys. As the days blurred into routine, Aisha's life revolved around those twins. She learned their quirks, Ethan's love for superhero stories, Evan's obsession with puzzles. She celebrated their small wins, like when Evan steered his chair across the room without help, and ached through their pains. You're my angels, she'd tell them, kissing their foreheads. In return, they gave her purpose. Little did she know that Bond was about to be tested in ways she couldn't imagine. One morning, everything changed. William called Aisha into his office. She thought it would be about the boys, but instead he stared at her with a serious face. Without warning, he accused her of stealing the children's medicine. Aisha was shocked. Her heart started racing. She couldn't understand what was happening. It didn't make sense. Aisha's hands began to shake as she tried to speak. Her voice cracked when she denied the accusation. She repeated over and over that she hadn't taken anything. She begged William to believe her, but he didn't move. His face was cold and his eyes showed no emotion. He told her that some of the medicine doses were missing and she was the only one who had access. Aisha knew the medicine was extremely valuable and very hard to find, but she had never thought about money. Her only focus had always been the boys. She loved them like her own children. She told William that there had to be a mistake, that maybe there was a problem with the storage, or maybe someone else had entered the room, but he didn't listen. He leaned back in his chair and said slowly, "You're going to pay for this." Aisha felt like the room was closing in on her. William stood up and walked around the desk. He stood just a few steps away from her and spoke in a low, calm voice that made everything worse. He said, "No one will believe you. I'm William Sterling. You're just the maid. Who will take your side?" Aisha's eyes filled with tears, but she tried to stay strong. Her thoughts raced. She wondered, who else could have done this? Who would want to hurt the boys? Why would anyone do something so cruel? She tried to think of someone who had entered the house recently. Maybe a delivery person, a visitor. But she kept coming back to the same fact. She had always been careful. The medicine was kept in a special refrigerator behind a locked door. She had always followed the rules. The idea that someone believed she would hurt the twins was unbearable. As William continued talking, Aisha felt like she was sinking. His words were sharp. He told her that if even one dose had been sold, it would be worth thousands of dollars on the black market. He accused her of wanting money more than the lives of the children. Aisha felt a deep pain in her chest. The thought of the boys suffering because someone believed she was a thief made her want to scream. She tried to tell William how much she loved the children, how she had been there for them through everything. But it didn't matter. William had already made up his mind. He wanted to press charges. He was already talking about police, lawyers, and prison. Aisha felt helpless. Her words seemed invisible. Her voice didn't matter. Aisha's mind went back to the night she spent by the boys' beds, holding their hands when they couldn't sleep. She remembered the smiles on their faces when she made them laugh or brought their favorite books. These boys weren't just her job, they were her life. She had been there when one of them almost stopped breathing. She had learned how to use the medical equipment and how to comfort them when they were scared. And now all of that was being erased by one accusation. Aisha knew she was innocent, but she also knew that being innocent wasn't always enough, especially not against a man like William Sterling. His name carried weight. His money and status gave him power that she didn't have. The worst part wasn't the fear of jail or the damage to her name. The real pain came from knowing that the boys might think she had betrayed them. Aisha had spent years earning their trust. They depended on her, and she had never failed them. But now they might believe she had stolen their only chance at life. That thought was unbearable. She couldn't imagine looking into their eyes and seeing fear or disappointment. She felt like she had lost everything, and yet she knew she had to keep fighting. She couldn't let this be the end. She had to find a way to prove her innocence. But at that moment, standing in William's office, all she could do was deny the accusation again, with tears in her eyes and her voice shaking. The conversation ended with William giving one final warning. He told Aisha to prepare herself for what was coming. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers," he said before turning his back on her. Aisha stood frozen for a few seconds, then walked slowly out of the room. Her legs felt weak, but she didn't fall. She walked past the hallway she knew so well, past the rooms filled with memories. As she reached the front door, she turned her head toward the stairs that led to the twins' room. She wanted to go to them, to explain, to hold them, but she couldn't. She stepped outside, unsure if she would ever return. The pain of being accused didn't compare to the pain of being seen as the woman who might have caused the death of the two boys she loved like her own. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the mansion, Emily Vaughn watched from a cracked door, a sly smile creeping across her face. She'd planted the seed, and now it was growing, covering her tracks as she pocketed the stolen doses for the black market deal she'd lined up. Aisha sat quietly in her cramped apartment, her back pressed against the cold kitchen wall. The room was dead silent, but her thoughts screamed. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled her knees to her chest. She just stumbled home from the mansion, where the accusation had hit like a gut punch. Now, alone in this shoebox of a place in Harlem, it all crashed down harder. She sobbed until her ribs ached. Every inch of her felt shattered. Flashes of the twins hit her like lightning. Ethan's tiny hands were clutching hers during a breathing scare, his chest heaving as she cranked the oxygen. "Don't leave, Mama Aisha," he'd gasped, eyes wide with fear. She'd held him tight, whispering, "I'm right here, baby. Breathe with me." Or Evan, giggling as she read bedtime stories, his head on her shoulder. "You're the best storyteller ever," he'd say, drifting off with a smile. Those moments weren't just memories. They were her anchor, and now the world thought she'd ripped it all away. Aisha stood up slowly, legs wobbly, and shuffled to the shelf where she kept a photo of the boys. It was from last birthday. They were in matching superhero capes, grinning despite the braces and chairs. She stared at it, thumb tracing their faces. It wasn't just her freedom on the line. It was her spot in their hearts. If she got nailed as guilty, they'd grow up thinking she sold out their lives for cash. That knife twisted deeper than any jail cell. She wiped her face and slumped at the tiny table. No lawyer, no savings. Nobody in her corner. The court loomed like a storm cloud. News alerts buzzed her phone, headlines already spitting venom. Billionaire's maid accused of stealing kids' life-saving meds. Strangers online piled on. Figures, always the help causing trouble. "Lock her up." The comments stung, laced with that ugly undertone. Black woman, white family, easy target. Aisha scrolled, stomach churning, then slammed the phone down. "This ain't fair," she muttered, voice cracking. She paced the room, fists clenched. Giving up crossed her mind. Pack a bag, hop a bus out of town, vanish. Let the pain fade. But nah, that'd mean letting the boys believe the lie. She couldn't stomach it. Flopping on the bed, she closed her eyes. Memories played like a bad movie reel. Late nights with Ethan crying from pain, she sang until he calmed. Learning the machines inside out, staying cool in emergencies. Evan is falling asleep on her lap after tough therapy days. Those bonds weren't fake. They were real, raw love. The thought of them hearing the news made her sick. "Mama Aisha's a thief," she'd hurl if she pictured their confused faces. Her hands balled the sheets. "I can't let that stick," she whispered. Even if the deck was stacked, rich white guy versus her, she had to push back. For them. Aisha got up, splashed water on her face in the tiny bathroom sink. Mirror showed a wreck. Red eyes, swollen cheeks, curls a mess from stress. But underneath, fire flickered. She was the one who'd stuck through the hard stuff. No quitting now. She grabbed a notepad, jotting shaky notes, timelines of med checks, doctor calls. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Her phone buzzed again. More hate online. She powered it off. "Screw y'all," she said to the empty room. Sitting by the window, she watched the street lights flicker on. The city hummed outside, indifferent. Aisha hugged herself, rocking slightly. The unfairness burned. How quickly folks judge based on skin and status. She wasn't some crook. She was family to those kids. But who cared? Power talked louder. Still, that spark wouldn't die. She'd show up, fight tooth and nail. The boys deserved the truth. As night dragged on, Aisha lay awake, staring at the ceiling cracks. Whispers of doubt crept in. What if she lost? What if the boys hated her? She shoved them down. You're innocent, she told her reflection earlier. Now repeating it like a mantra, her voice steadied. The hurt lingered, fear gnawed, but resolve built. She wasn't done, not by a long shot. In the quiet, she pulled out Evan's old drawing from her bag, the stick figure family. Forever, he'd written in wobbly letters. Aisha traced it, a tear splashing the paper. That word fueled her. No matter the storm coming, she'd weather it. For Ethan, for Evan, for the love that no lie could erase. Aisha sat on the long wooden bench in the courtroom, her hands folded in her lap, trembling just a bit. She wore her old work uniform, the one she'd pulled from the back of the closet, faded from too many washes. The air hung heavy, every cough or shuffle echoing like thunder. Across the room, the big door swung open, and William Sterling strode in. Sharp suit, polished shoes, flanked by Emily Vaughn, leading a pack of lawyers and a couple of beefy security guys. He moved like he owned the place. Hell, he probably did, with his billions. Heads turned, whispers rippled. Nobody glanced at Aisha. When the judge banged the gavel, everyone stood. The trial kicked off. Aisha's heart pounded like a drum in her chest. She was flying solo. No lawyer showed. The court-appointed one was a no-show. It was her against this powerhouse, in a room that already smelled like guilt. The prosecutor, a slick guy in Emily's pocket, boomed his opening. He painted Aisha as a snake in the grass, a black maid from the wrong side of town who saw dollar signs in those pricey meds. She exploited trust, he snarled, turning sick kids into a payday. Aisha wanted to yell back, but her throat clamped shut. Folks in the gallery murmured, shaking heads like it all added up. The prosecutor kept rolling, flashing the value of the drugs, more than most folks earned in a lifetime. Then he dropped the bomb. This wasn't theft. It could have killed two innocent boys. Cameras clicked, reporters scribbled. To them, it was juicy copy. To Aisha, it was her world crumbling. She listened as her life got twisted into a crime thriller. The court had tossed her a lawyer, but he ghosted. She begged for a delay, but the judge shut it down. Every jab from the prosecutor landed like a fist. He paraded evidence, boxes of docs, camera footage, missing item lists, and staff statements. The video played, Aisha's face on screen, opening the safe. But it wasn't her. That deep fake crap Emily cooked up. Aisha knew it, but in court, it looked damning. No sound, no context. She'd never touched that safe. A former housekeeper piped up. She was always too chummy with the kids, like it was suspicious. Another claimed overhearing Aisha gripe about the meds cost. Aisha remembered. It was shock, not greed. But nobody asked her side. She finally got a shot to speak. Standing on shaky legs, gripping the rail, she croaked, I never took a thing. I love those boys like my own. Her voice wobbled, but she pushed on. The judge cut her off. Stick to facts, not feelings. Aisha sat down, cheeks burning, the room barely blinking. To them, she was done. Poor, no pull, easy mark. William sat cool as ice, whispering to Emily, glancing her way with zero pity. When he took the stand, he played the heartbroken dad. I trusted her like family. This betrayal guts me. I'm just protecting my sons. The judge nodded along, eating it up. Aisha bit her lip to keep from screaming. It's not betrayal. I didn't do it. But eyes around the room judged hard. No one wondered why she'd bite the hand that fed her. The footage replayed, her image fiddling with the lock. Proof, the prosecutor crowed. Whispers turned to nods. Online, it blew up. Aisha scrolled on her phone during a break, seeing the hate. Typical stealing from white folks. She looks guilty AF. The racism hit like acid, burning deep. As the day wrapped, Aisha felt drained, like she'd run a marathon in quicksand. The courtroom wasn't justice. It was a show. Words, moves, flashes, all about power. She thought of the twins. Were they hearing this? Believing it? Her gut twisted. The judge called a recess till tomorrow, reviewing the documents. Aisha barely registered, lost in how nobody saw her real self. She stood slowly eyeing William. He didn't look back. She shuffled out, voice drowned, side picked, and it wasn't hers. Emily lingered, smirking at the chaos she'd spun. William clapped her shoulder. Nailed it! But Aisha, stepping into the hall amid stares, clutched her resolve. This wasn't over. Not yet. Aisha sat back down on the courtroom bench, barely holding it together. Her hands were cold and her legs weak. As the trial resumed on day 2, William's lawyers stood and confidently displayed new evidence on the screen in front of everyone. They showed security camera footage that seemed to catch Aisha opening one of the locked safes in the house. The video was clear, but something about it felt wrong to her. She had never touched those safes. Her job was only to care for the twins, never to handle storage or finances, but the footage showed her image moving toward the safe and opening it. The lawyers said it was proof that she had taken the missing medication. Then they showed supposed bank records with her name on them. According to the documents, large sums of money had been transferred to an account under Aisha's name only days after the drugs disappeared. Aisha's mouth fell open. She had never seen that account before. She stood up shaky and asked to speak. The judge allowed it briefly. Aisha looked around the courtroom, her voice rising with panic. She said the video must have been edited, that she never had access to those safes. She explained that the bank account wasn't hers, and that she didn't even know the bank where the account was supposedly open. But before she could say more, Emily interrupted her with another objection. The judge accepted it and told Aisha to sit down. She tried again, louder this time, to say that someone was framing her. But the judge reminded her to speak only when spoken to and moved on with the hearing. Emily, the well-dressed white lawyer with a calm and confident tone, stood once more. She repeated that Aisha had betrayed the trust of a family that had welcomed her. She said Aisha used her role as a caregiver to get close enough to commit theft in silence. Emily continued speaking using firm words. She said Aisha's actions showed careful planning. She pointed at the footage, the bank records, and the missing medicine. She looked at the judge and asked for an immediate guilty verdict. Aisha sat frozen. She couldn't believe what was happening. Every part of her life was being twisted. She had spent so many nights staying up with the twins, making sure they were comfortable and had their medication on time. She had worked on weekends, holidays, and through sickness, always staying by their side. Now everything she had done was being erased by a set of lies that looked too real. She wanted to ask how someone had made those videos or who had access to her identity to fake the bank documents, but no one was listening to her anymore. The courtroom only heard what the lawyers wanted them to hear, and none of it included her side of the story. As the judge took notes in silence, his face showed no reaction. He didn't look angry, but he didn't look curious either. Aisha watched him, hoping for some sign that he was unsure, that he had doubts. But there was nothing. He just kept writing. The audience in the courtroom looked at Aisha like she had already been sentenced. People whispered to each other, some shaking their heads, a few even stared directly at her with disgust. Aisha felt like she was no longer a person in their eyes, just a criminal. She remembered when the twins were first diagnosed, how she had taken the time to learn how to use their machines, how to understand their symptoms, and how to comfort them when they cried. She had done things most people couldn't, and she had never once asked for more money or recognition. She only wanted them to feel safe. Now those memories felt far away, buried under this nightmare. Aisha looked toward the back of the courtroom, as if the boys might appear, or someone who knew the truth might step forward. But the door stayed closed, and no one came to help. Her chest felt tight. She thought of the time when one of the boys had a fever and couldn't sleep. She had sung softly until he finally relaxed. She thought of how they had drawn pictures together and how they had started calling her Mama Aisha. Those moments were the most real parts of her life. But now in front of strangers, they didn't mean anything. The lawyers spoke with confidence. The evidence looked real, and the judge didn't ask any questions. Aisha had nothing left but her word, and no one in the room seemed interested in it. She wiped her eyes and sat still, trying not to cry, even though every part of her felt like falling apart. The judge looked at the documents once more and said the court would take a short break before moving forward. People stood and stretched. Some walked out to talk to the reporters waiting outside. Aisha stayed in her seat, staring at the floor. She felt crushed, not just by the accusations, but by the way everyone had turned against her so easily. She was just one person, and they were many, with money, with power, and with influence, and she had none of it. She didn't even have a proper defense. The edited footage, the false bank account, the cold stares, they were like walls closing in on her. Even though she knew the truth, it felt like the truth didn't matter. She held her arms around herself, trying to stay calm. All she could think about was the boys. She had loved them like sons. But now none of that seemed to count in the face of such a well-planned lie. Just as the judge was about to continue, the back doors of the courtroom creaked open slowly. Heads whipped around. For a beat, confusion hung thick. No one got it. Then gasps ripped through the room. Stepping in were Ethan and Evan. Ethan gripped his walker tight, dragging each leg forward with a tremble, face pinched but set like stone. Evan buzzed beside him in his motorized chair, steering steady, eyes scanning till they locked on Aisha. The whole place went dead quiet. The chatter, the tension, it vanished. Even the judge froze mid-note, pen hovering. Nobody saw this coming. The effort these kids poured in just to show up screamed volumes. Every shaky step, every wheel turn. Aisha's jaw dropped. She hadn't clued them in, hadn't begged for help. Seeing them there freshly gutted her. Not pain, but a raw hit of love that knocked the wind out. The crowd stayed glued, breaths held. William leaned forward, smirk wiped clean for the first time. The boys didn't rush. Couldn't. Ethan hauled his walker inch by inch, arms quaking. Evan kept pace, face fierce. They finally hit Aisha's spot. Ethan ditched the walker, arms wrapping her waist as he sobbed softly. Evan grabbed her hand from his chair. Aisha's reflexes kicked in. She pulled them close, tears soaking her face. After all the crap, they'd chosen her. Ethan's head lifted, eyes red, mouth quivering as he faced the judge. "She didn't steal anything," he said, voice weak but sharp. "She's our mama Aisha. She takes care of us every day." Evan chimed in. "We saw her, Emily, messing with the boxes when Dad wasn't around. We didn't know what to say." The room stayed hushed, every ear tuned in. No interruptions. Aisha's heart hammered. The truth, straight, no frills, finally hung out there, from the mouths that mattered most. The judge leaned in, pen down, eyes on the boys. A few in the crowd covered their mouths, tears welling. These fragile kids had flipped the script like no suit could. William bolted up, face flushing red, jaw locked. He jabbed a finger. "This is BS. They're confused, sick kids imagining stuff." His voice cracked, control slipping. But the judge slammed the gavel. "Enough! Let him finish." William tried again, but the judge shot him down. "Sit your ass down." William slumped, fuming but stuck. The boys kept going. "She gives us meds right on time," Ethan said. "Sleeps by our beds when we're scared," Evan added. "She knows when we're hurting." No script, no polish, just raw facts. That cut through the lies like a hot knife. The gallery, once buzzing with Aisha's guilt, now hung silent. Some dabbed eyes, others stared wide. It wasn't just words, it was the guts to show. Weak bodies, big risks, facing a room of strangers for her. These boys knew her inside out, lived with her, trusted her, loved her enough to defy their dad, the powerhouse. That bravery? Couldn't buy it, couldn't fake it. Real as hell. For the first time in days, Aisha didn't feel alone. The judge cleared his throat. "Boys, walk me through what you saw." They nodded. Ethan started. One night, noises woke him. Peeked out, spotted Emily sneaking from the medroom, box in hand. Never seen her there before. Told Dad, but he brushed it off as a dream. Evan backed it, details matching. The room shifted. Aisha squeezed their hands, whispering, "Thanks, my babies." The judge scribbled fast. No protest from the prosecution. This bombshell changed the game. He ordered an immediate dig. "Pull the records, now." Court staff hustled, yanking files from Emily's team. The judge pored over them, highlighting mismatches, shipment logs off, signatures copied. A hospital witness got hauled in quickly, swearing he'd overheard Emily haggling with shady buyers for rare doses. Mentioned high rollers, not her first rodeo. Gasps erupted. Aisha froze, staring at the judge, then Emily, who went pale as a ghost. Drama exploded. Emily stammered denials, but evidence piled. Fingerprints on the safe, real bank trails leading to her offshore stash. She deep-faked the vid, forged the accounts, all to cover her black market hustle. The judge read aloud. Unlogged pulls of 3 doses. Aisha listened, tears streaming. Truth hit daylight. The thief wasn't the black maid. It was the white lawyer twisting justice. The room went pin-drop silent. Not confusion, shock. Headlines would flip, but right now eyes drilled Emily. The judge barked for officers. Cuff her! Fraud, theft, illegal trafficking. Emily didn't fight, head down, avoiding glares as they slapped on the bracelets and hauled her out amid murmurs. Aisha clutched the boy's hands, head bowed, sobbing quietly. Relief, not fear. The courtroom wasn't her enemy anymore. They'd seen it. Her innocence. Emily's dirt. Folks who'd sneered now shot regretful looks. Some ashamed. William sat stunned, staring at the empty spot beside him. He'd bought her lies hook, line, and sinker. Betrayal etched his face. He'd wrecked an innocent for nothing. Aisha breathed deep, holding the twins close. The shift was real. No docs or tapes did this. 2 kids' truth did. And it stuck. The judge leaned forward, placed his pen down, and looked directly at Aisha, then at the boys. He didn't speak for several seconds. Finally, he asked in a calm voice, "Can you both explain exactly what you saw?" The boys nodded. One began describing the night they saw Emily in the house near the storage room. They didn't recognize her intent at first, but they remembered hearing voices and seeing boxes being moved. They had tried to tell William, but he dismissed them, saying they were confused. That's when they stopped talking about it until now. The courtroom was silent as they spoke. Aisha listened closely, amazed by their memory and courage. The judge took notes slowly, and even the prosecution listened without protest. Aisha squeezed their hands, whispering a quiet, "Thank you." And for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe. The truth had finally been spoken, and the whole room had heard it. The judge called for a short break before returning to the bench. After a few minutes, everyone was back in their seats. The judge then announced that the court would now hear the twins' testimony officially. 2 court workers carefully helped them get into place, one guiding Evan in the wheelchair to the front, the other gently assisting Ethan with the walker. The courtroom remained quiet. Everyone was watching closely. The judge looked at them kindly and asked if they felt ready to speak. They both nodded. Ethan started first, speaking slowly but clearly. He explained how Aisha had always been there every morning, every night, during the worst days and the good ones too. He said she never missed a single dose of their medication. She stayed with them when they were sick, comforted them when they were afraid, and took care of everything like family. He said she never left their side. Then Evan spoke. He looked at the judge and said he had seen something important. One night when he couldn't sleep, he heard footsteps outside the room. He thought it was Aisha, but when he peeked through the small opening in the door, he saw someone else. It was Emily, the woman who worked with his father. She was walking out of the storage room where the medicine was kept. He didn't understand why she was there. He had never seen her go near that area before. But she walked out with something in her hand and looked around before disappearing down the hallway. Ethan added that they hadn't told anyone before because their father always dismissed their concerns. Now hearing both boys say the same thing, the courtroom began to react. People looked at each other in disbelief. The judge took detailed notes. This changed everything. The courtroom had focused on Aisha for days, but now there was another piece to the story. Aisha's hands were still shaking, but she finally felt like she had a chance to speak. With the judge's permission, she stood up and handed in a folder of her own. It contained detailed medical records, written logs, and her personal notes. The pages included times when medication was given, her sleep schedules, and exact entries of when she had contacted the children's doctors or stayed up monitoring their symptoms. Each page matched hospital check-ins and regular updates she had provided to the medical staff. It wasn't just her word anymore. There was proof, dates, times, and actions that showed her dedication. The judge flipped through the documents slowly, nodding as he read. Aisha stood still, waiting for his reaction. Meanwhile, William was watching closely. His jaw was tight, and his fingers tapped quickly on the table. When the judge asked if the prosecution wanted to respond, William stood without waiting for his lawyer and spoke directly, something he hadn't done before. William pointed at Aisha and raised his voice. He said she was manipulating everyone, even the children. He accused her of brainwashing them and using their illness to gain sympathy. He said the boys didn't know what they were saying and were clearly coached. He looked around the room for support, but the reaction was different now. People no longer looked at him with trust. Instead, some shook their heads and others looked down. Aisha stayed calm and didn't react to his words. The judge let him speak, but after a few moments he asked William to sit down. In addressing the court, the judge said the new testimony and documents would need to be carefully reviewed. Aisha's quiet strength and the boy's brave appearance had clearly left an impression. The balance of the trial had shifted. William's confidence from earlier was gone. The more he spoke, the angrier he became, making him look desperate instead of in control. The courtroom began to feel different. Even the jury members seemed more alert now. Some scribbled notes with new interest. A few glanced toward Aisha with what looked like respect. The judge asked for a copy of the children's full medical logs and hospital communication records. Aisha said she would provide them. The judge also ordered that Emily, who had been mentioned in the boy's testimony, be temporarily removed from her role pending investigation. She stood still, showing no emotion, but her face had lost its color. The courtroom murmured again. For the first time, the idea that the accusation might be part of a bigger plan didn't sound far-fetched. The boys had nothing to gain by lying. They didn't understand legal tactics or strategy. They had simply told the truth. Aisha, who had been treated like a criminal for days, now stood as someone the court had to listen to. The people in the gallery saw it. So did the judge. William no longer looked confident. He leaned forward, whispering quickly to his remaining lawyer, who avoided eye contact with him. His face had changed. The calm expression he wore before was replaced by frustration. His shoulders were tense, and he kept glancing toward the judge's bench. The court wasn't reacting the way he expected. What was once a clear path to victory now looked shaky. Even his own team seemed less certain. One of his assistants passed him a note, but he pushed it aside. He glanced toward the twins, who were now seated quietly beside Aisha, and for a moment his expression turned cold. The judge asked a few more questions about the night the boys had seen Emily leaving the storage room. Their answers remained consistent. Each detail matched, and their voices, although soft, were confident. The court reporter took everything down carefully. The entire room understood that something important was unfolding, and it couldn't be ignored anymore. As the session ended for the day, the judge announced that further investigation would take place regarding the claims against Emily. He also thanked the boys for their honesty and strength. Aisha finally felt like the weight she had carried was beginning to lift. She was still scared, still unsure of what would happen next. But for the first time since the nightmare began, she didn't feel like a target. She felt like someone whose truth mattered. William stood up slowly, no longer rushing to speak. His face showed defeat. The courtroom watched him walk out without the proud posture he once had. He didn't say a word. Aisha remained seated with the boys, holding their hands. Around her there was no applause, no celebration, but there was silence, a respectful, thoughtful silence. The courtroom, once ready to see her punished, was now starting to question everything. Aisha had stayed quiet for long enough. Now the truth was speaking for itself. And there you have it, the story of Aisha, a woman who faced unimaginable injustice, but proved that truth and genuine love will always triumph over lies and prejudice, no matter the odds. It's a reminder that real bonds can't be broken by power or deception, and sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. What about you? Have you ever stood up against unfair judgment or witnessed love conquer hate in your own life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories and spark some real conversation. Stick around for our next video, where we'll uncover another gripping tale of everyday heroes turning the tables on corruption and finding redemption in the unlikeliest places. You won't want to miss it. Thanks so much for watching and joining this journey with me. Your support means the world. See you next time. Stay strong and keep believing.